on top of a 400-foot cliff on the island of Okinawa. A single American soldier refused to come down. Below him, his company had been driven back off the ridge by a Japanese counterattack. The order was to retreat. He stayed. Scattered across the top were dozens of wounded men, too hurt to move themselves. One at a time, he dragged them to the edge and lowered them down the cliff face on a rope. And every time he finished one, the witnesses remembered him praying the same thing. Lord, please help me get one more. He did this for hours. He was not carrying a rifle he never had. His name was Desmond Doss, and he had told the United States Army to its face that he would not touch a gun. The movie you may have seen gets the courage right. It gets a surprising amount of the rest wrong. This is the documented story. Where it differs from the film, we will say so. Desmond Thomas Doss was born on the 7th of February 1919 in Lynchburg, Virginia. His father, William, was a carpenter who had served in the First World War. His mother, Bertha, worked in a shoe factory to help hold the family together. He grew up in a neighborhood called Fairview Heights with an older sister and a younger brother. It was the Depression, and there was little money in the Doss home. Desmond finished only about a year of high school before he left to go to work and help support them. What the family did have in abundance was faith. They were Seventh-day Adventists, and they were devout ones. It was a demanding faith. It kept the Sabbath from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset and rested completely. It kept the vegetarian table, and it read the commandments not as suggestions but as law. One of them, in particular, would shape everything Desmond Doss ever did. Thou shalt not kill. On the wall of the Doss home hung a framed picture of the 10 Commandments. His father had bought it at an auction. Beside each commandment was a small illustration. Next to thou shalt not kill was a drawing of Cain standing over the body of his brother Abel. By his own account and his sister's, Desmond would drag a chair across the floor and just stare at that picture. He would ask himself how a brother could do such a thing to a brother, and he decided as a boy in his own mind what God was asking of him. If you love me, you won't kill. It was not an abstract idea to him. It became the fixed center of his life, and it never moved. There was a second moment that hardened that conviction, and the film changes it, so it is worth telling straight. One night, Desmond's father had been drinking, and during a family argument, he drew a pistol. In the real account, the gun was pointed at Desmond's uncle, not, as the movie shows it, at his mother. His mother stepped between them, took the weapon out of her husband's hand, and turned to her son. She handed young Desmond the gun and told him to hide it. So he did. Then he watched the police come and take his father away. He believed that night that his father would have killed a man, and a gun had almost done it. By his own telling, that was the moment he made himself a promise. He would never hold a gun again. He kept that promise for the rest of his life, even when keeping it nearly destroyed him. There is one more thing from those years worth clearing up, because the movie invents it. Desmond once heard a radio appeal for blood after an accident and walked about 6 miles to give a pint. That is true, but the film's story, that he gave blood to meet a pretty nurse named Dorothy, is not. He met Dorothy Shute through his church. She was not a nurse. They simply shared the faith. By 1941, Desmond was a grown man, working as a ship joiner at the naval shipyard in Newport News. He was a carpenter on warships. It was vital defense work, and it came with something precious in wartime, a deferment. He could have stayed home legally and never worn a uniform at all. And this is the first thing the popular story gets wrong. Desmond Doss did not enlist. He was drafted in the spring of 1942, and he turned the deferment down. He believed the country was worth serving. He simply would not take a life to serve it. He rejected the label conscientious objector. He called himself instead a conscientious cooperator. The distinction mattered to him. An objector, in his mind, sat the war out. He would not sit anything out. He would wear the uniform. He would go wherever they sent him. He would walk into fire to save lives. He would only refuse 2 things. He would not carry a weapon, and he would not work on his Saturday Sabbath. The Army had a classification that fit him, 1AO. It meant a conscientious objector who was still available for military service as a non-combatant. His church had reached agreements with the government before the war to place its young men in medical roles, so Desmond expected to be made a medic. It was the perfect fit. A man whose faith forbade killing, whose whole purpose was saving. That August, before he shipped out, he married Dorothy. Remember that date. He was already a married man months before the trouble started. He was inducted at Camp Lee, then sent for training to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. There he was assigned as a company aid man in the 77th Infantry Division. A company aid man is the medic who goes forward with the riflemen, unarmed, into the same fire to patch them up where they fall. It was exactly the job he wanted, but first he had to survive his own side. To the men training around him, a soldier who would not pick up a rifle was not a man of principle. He was a problem. In their eyes, when the shooting started, his refusal could get them killed, and they let him know it. They called him a misfit. They mocked him as Holy Joe. Officers piled the hardest, dirtiest details on him, hoping he would quit. One soldier told him to his face that he would not come back from combat alive. At night, when Desmond knelt beside his bunk to pray, the men in the barracks threw their boots at him. Here the film adds a scene that the record does not support. There is no evidence Doss was ever dragged from his bed and beaten in the night by his fellow soldiers. The truth was quieter and in its own way harder to bear. It was contempt, daily, grinding contempt, from the very men he had sworn to run into fire for. His Sabbath was a second battle. He would not train on Saturdays and ask for a pass to attend church. When officers wanted to punish him, they simply denied him leave. But the real crisis came at weapons qualification, the day the whole company had to prove out with the rifle. Doss refused to touch it. And this is the moment the movie turns into a dramatic courtroom trial. So here, carefully, is what the record actually shows happened. An officer forced a rifle into his hands and threatened him with a court-martial if he would not carry it. But a second officer intervened. He told the first to leave the man alone and to respect what was written in his service record. And the threat simply evaporated. Desmond Doss was never actually court-martialed. There was no trial. That courtroom scene and the jail cell are the film's invention. The reality was an administrative fight, not a trial, because when the court-martial threat failed, the Army tried another door. They moved to discharge him as mentally unfit under what was called a Section 8. The paperwork would have branded him unstable, a misfit, and quietly washed him out of the Army. A board was convened to do exactly that, and Desmond Doss refused to let them. By his account, he said he would be a very poor Christian to accept a discharge that called his faith a mental illness. His wife, Dorothy, mailed him the church's official documents on non-combatant service, which the Army was bound by law to honor. The discharge attempt collapsed. His right to serve unarmed as a medic was upheld. He had won the argument on paper. Now he would have to win it somewhere. Paper meant nothing. In the spring of 1944, the 77th Infantry Division shipped out to the Pacific. They called themselves the Statue of Liberty Division after their shoulder patch. Most had never seen combat. Their first test came on the 21st of July when they landed on the island of Guam. The fighting was close and vicious through dense jungle against a Japanese garrison dug into the hills. The division fought its way inland, took the high ground at Mount Tinjo, and ground north against fierce resistance. And out in that jungle, the man who would not carry a gun did the thing he had promised he would do. Again and again he went forward into the open, under fire, with no weapon to cover himself, and pulled the wounded back. A rifleman under fire can at least shoot back. A company aid man has only his hands and his nerve. Doss had made a study of nerve, and the men who had thrown boots at him began to notice something. When they were hit and screaming and pinned down, it was Holy Joe who came crawling out to reach them. For his courage in treating the wounded under fire on Guam, Desmond Doss was awarded the Bronze Star. It was the first of his medals, and the change it marked in his company was only beginning. That autumn, the division moved on to the Philippines and the muddy, bloody fight for the island of Leyte. They came ashore in late November of 1944 and pushed inland through rain and jungle. In December, the 77th made an amphibious landing behind enemy lines and seized the port of Ormoc. It was the harbor the Japanese were using to funnel reinforcements onto the island. Taking it helped decide the campaign, and through all of it, Doss worked the line as he always did. Exposed, unarmed, reaching men no one else could reach. By one account from those weeks, he dashed into the open to treat a wounded man while a sniper had him in his sights. His comrades could not fire back without hitting their own, so the medic worked and the sniper watched, and somehow he lived. For his service on Leyte, Desmond Doss was awarded a second Bronze Star. And here the real story quietly separates itself from the legend. Almost every telling saves Desmond Doss's redemption for the cliff at Hacksaw Ridge. The record puts it earlier. The scholarly biography from the Library of Virginia states it plainly. The harassment ended in July of 1944. That is Guam, his first combat. A full year before Okinawa, the contempt of his own company had already turned to respect out there, under fire, on Guam and on Leyte. By the time they reached Okinawa, the man they once called a coward was the man they trusted most to save them. Something else came off Leyte with him, though no one knew it yet. He had contracted tuberculosis on that island. It would go undiagnosed until after the war, and in the end, it would take more from Desmond Doss than any bullet the Japanese ever fired. In the spring of 1945 came Okinawa. It was the last great battle of the Pacific War and one of the bloodiest fights in American history. For nearly 3 months, more than 250,000 people would die on and around that island. Directly in the path of the 77th Division stood a ridge. The maps called the Maida Escarpment. The American soldiers gave it another name, Hacksaw Ridge. It was a cliff, roughly 400 feet high, that ended in a sheer rock wall at the very top. To reach the summit, the men had to climb up cargo nets that had been thrown over the edge. And the top was a slaughterhouse. The Japanese had turned it into a fortress of caves, tunnels, and hidden guns. Whoever climbed onto that plateau climbed into interlocking fields of fire. On the 2nd of May, Doss went up with his company. What he did over the following days is recorded in his Medal of Honor citation. He treated men where they fell, again and again, sometimes within yards of the enemy's own positions. In one action, the citation describes him crawling forward to reach wounded men near a cave mouth under a barrage of fire. He would not leave a single one of them out there. And then came the day the entire story turns on. Around the 5th of May, the Japanese threw a heavy counterattack against the ridge. The blow was so hard that the American troops were driven back off the top of the escarpment. The order came down to withdraw, get off the cliff, fall back to safety. Desmond Doss would not go, because scattered across that plateau were the wounded, dozens of them, men too badly hurt to climb down, left behind in the retreat, waiting to be finished off. So one man, alone, under fire, stayed on top of Hacksaw Ridge and went to work. He dragged each wounded soldier to the lip of the cliff. He looped a rope support around him, a knot he had learned tying off patients, and lowered him down the 400-foot face, down to the soldiers waiting below. Then he turned around and went back for the next one. One man, then another, for hours with the enemy all around him. And after each one, by the account of the men who watched it happen, he prayed the same short prayer. Lord, please help me get one more. And then one more. And then one more. The Army would later credit Desmond Doss with saving 75 men on that ridge. That number deserves honesty because it is a compromise, not a count. Doss himself always thought it was closer to 50. His commanding officer was certain it was nearer 100. Neither man could prove it, so they settled on 75. The true figure will never be known, but sit with even the lowest estimate. 50 men, 50 human beings lowered down a cliff, by hand, one at a time, by a soldier who would not carry a rifle to defend himself. And the ridge was not the end of it. His Medal of Honor citation records action after action across those days. It describes him crawling 200 yards forward, ahead of the lines, under fire, to reach a single wounded man and bring him back. It describes him going 4 separate times to within 25 feet of a cave mouth full of enemy soldiers, 4 times into point-blank range to drag out men who would otherwise have died there. On another day, an artillery and mortar barrage caught his company in the open, and again he crawled through it to treat the hit. This was not a single act of courage on a single afternoon. It was a pattern sustained for 3 weeks by an unarmed man. Doss did not leave Okinawa after that day. He stayed on the line and kept working for more than 2 weeks. On the night of the 21st of May, near the Shuri defenses, his war finally caught up with him, 4 times over. First, a grenade exploded close to him and tore shrapnel through both of his legs. He was a medic. He knew what calling for help meant. It meant pulling another aid man out into the fire. So he refused to call. He dressed his own wounds in the dark, and he waited. He waited roughly 5 hours for the litter bearers to reach him. When they finally came and carried him off, they passed another man, more badly wounded than he was. Doss rolled off his own stretcher. He told the bearers to take the other man first. And while he lay on the ground waiting his turn again, a sniper's bullet shattered his arm. So he did something almost unbelievable. He took a rifle stock, the stock of the weapon he would never fire, and he bound it to his own broken arm as a splint. Then he crawled, roughly 300 yards across open ground to the aid station. By his own account, Somewhere in the chaos of that night, he lost the little Bible Dorothy had given him. When his company heard, the men went back out across that battlefield and searched until they found it, and they carried it back to him. The men who had once thrown boots at a praying soldier now combed the battlefield under fire to return his Bible. Desmond Doss survived the war, but the war was not done taking from him. The tuberculosis he had carried out of Leyte was finally found, and it went to work on his lungs. He would spend roughly 5.5 years in and out of military hospitals. The disease and the surgery to cut it out of him cost him an entire lung and 5 ribs. To fight the infection, doctors treated him with a powerful new antibiotic of that era, streptomycin. It was a miracle drug against tuberculosis. But in Desmond Doss, it carried a cruel side effect. It slowly destroyed his hearing. In 1951, the Army medically discharged him, rated 90% disabled. By the 1970s, he had gone completely deaf from the very treatment that had saved his life. He would not hear the world again until a cochlear implant restored his hearing decades later. The man who had spent a war keeping other men alive would spend the rest of his life paying for it with his own body. On the 12th of October, 1945, Desmond Doss stood on the lawn of the White House. President Harry Truman took the Medal of Honor, the highest decoration the nation can give, and placed it around his neck. Desmond Doss was the first conscientious objector in American history to receive it. Think about the contradiction in that sentence. The country's highest award for valor in war, given to a man who had refused, on principle, to carry a weapon into that war. By Doss's own recollection, Truman held onto his hand and would not let go. He remembered the president telling him he considered this a greater honor than being president himself. And when people, for the rest of his life, asked Desmond Doss how he had done it, he always pointed away from himself. He said he had simply tried to live by the golden rule, to do for others what he would want done for him. He did not turn his medal into money. He went home. In the 1950s, Desmond and Dorothy settled on a small farm in Rising Fawn, Georgia, up on Lookout Mountain. He lived quietly on his disability, giving his time to youth work in his church. In 1959, he appeared shyly on the television program This Is Your Life, as the country remembered him for a moment. And then, for more than 50 years, Desmond Doss said no to Hollywood. The offers came. Producers wanted the rights to his story. He turned every one of them down. He was afraid they would twist the truth to sell tickets. And more than that, he was afraid they would cheapen the faith that was the entire reason he had done any of it. So he did something quietly shrewd. He created a council, the Desmond Doss Council, to hold the rights to his own life. Any film would have to pass through it and honor his faith and the facts, or it would simply never be made. That control is the reason a careful documentary was finally made in 2004, while he was still alive to guide it. In 1991, Dorothy, his wife of nearly 50 years, died following a car accident. He married again 2 years later to a widow named Frances. Desmond Doss died on the 23rd of March, 2006, at the age of 87. He was laid to rest in the Chattanooga National Cemetery. His story did not stay buried. As far back as 1951, a church youth camp in Michigan was named in his honor. The documentary he had guided, called The Conscientious Objector, was released in 2004 and won award after award on the festival circuit. In 2007, a bronze statue of him was unveiled in Collegedale, Tennessee. And then, 10 years after his death, the film arrived and carried his name to millions who had never heard it. And it got the heart of it right. The cliff, the rope, the one more, the man who would not carry a gun, all of that is true. What the film blurred was the true shape of him, that his courage was not born on that ridge. It was fixed as a boy, dragging a chair across the floor to stare at a picture of Cain and Abel. It was tested nearly to breaking by his own army in a barracks before he ever laid eyes on the enemy. And it was proven, not first on Hacksaw Ridge, but on Guam and on Leyte a year earlier, one wounded man at a time. He never fired a shot in the war. He may have saved as many as 100 lives in it. Desmond Doss spent that war reaching into the fire for other men and asking each time only for the strength to reach one more.